Welcome to Well Good Movies, the podcast for film fans by film fans. Every episode we look at films old and new to choose what should be preserved for all time in our movie vault. With lively topics, big questions and crazy challenges to entertain us and our guests, we always look to have fun by giving you the topics worth discussing and the movies worth watching, even if there are some duds along the way. But don't just take my word for it, here's a preview of what to expect in today's episode. But you could just win the lottery every day.
Yeah, but you win the lottery at 8 o'clock at night? That gives you a couple of hours to get the money, spend the money in any significant way, before you then fall asleep and wake back up.
Hell of a night.
To be fair, I'd like to change mine. After listening to Dave's, I feel like mine's a bit...
$1 million or M&M's.
Right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Are you not entertained? I am the father. Wait! Here's Johnny. I'll be back.
It's not the car, it's a silly movie boy.
Well, good movies.
Hello and welcome to Well Good Movies, the podcast that gives you the topics worth discussing and the movies worth watching. I am your host, David Osger, coming to you on this very Good Friday. But unfortunately, I can't find my co-host. I've come into some form of cave where I've been told that he is. There's some kind of tomb here, which, The Rock is missing. I don't know where he is. Craig, where are you?
Behind you.
Craig has risen again. Is this Sunday yet, Craig?
I mean, this is a weird stance for you to take that I'm Jesus. Is this literally a hair comment?
You do kind of look like Jesus at the moment. But
I don't. I'm sorry, but if Jesus had the stomach that I do, then I have no idea if he was actually giving out to the 5,000 just the loaves and fishes or just scoffing at himself.
But we are also joined by our very own Easter Bunny, bringing us some Easter eggs on this episode, is our good friend and collaborator, Stephen Jones. Hello, Steve.
Hello, I thought you were going to introduce me as Judas, so I was quite happy.
That was an option. We're waiting for you to do something wrong for that. At the moment, you're in our good books. I did have to laugh the other day when you sent a video message, so spun the chair, pretended to be Dr. Evil, stroking an invisible cat, and went to the effort of throwing away the invisible cat.
I would like to say this is all true. This is what I do. So yeah, that invisible cat is fine. I'm feeding it invisible cat food, and it's barely alive. It's all right.
Okay, I'm going to bite here. Why did you do any of this?
Well, I forgot the reason, to be honest.
It's just Steve. He doesn't need a reason for any of it, to be honest. To be fair, you should hear the Tupperware podcast that he sent me. There's no reason for that either. But apart from Tupperware, Steve, we brought you on today as, obviously, niche films are often your specialty, as we've learned in the past. You've talked about bizarre Disney sports movies. You've talked about Chicken Little, one of the least beloved Disney films, which you came on to sort of defend and make a ride about. And also you've been going back through our old episodes as a good way to have some thing to listen to when you're doing work, when we're all locked down and working from home more. So we thought this would be a good opportunity for you to come on to this episode, which we'll get on to specifically what it's about today. But yeah, what made you have that idea of sort of writing down films from what we put into the movie vault and that you hear us discuss? How, what brought you to that sort of decision?
Yeah, so, as you mentioned about my speciality for niche films. I just have really I really wanted to start watching the classics of lately. And I just thought this would be the perfect way to go through the Well Good Movies podcast and just list the films that have been mentioned and make a real good effort to watch them. And I feel as though, there's some great films in the vault, and I've got my list ready and it keeps growing with each podcast I listen to. And I'm really looking forward to making my way through that list and hopefully gaining some knowledge in the world of film at the same time.
Yeah, well, we love to hear it. Like I said, it's the kind of stuff that, we hope to hear from our listeners and our guests, sort of exploring these movies as well as maybe reminiscing about them and that kind of stuff as well. But it also links into what we're talking about today, as in films that we've never seen before or have a certain status or expectation. So that also links in nicely to a project that we're working on for Fresh Take as well. So it's worth mentioning at the top here because it relates so much to the topics and reason that we wanted to do this episode today. So again, Steve, tell us all about it.
me and films, we have an interesting relationship. We always have. I've never really gone for the main blockbusters or, the ones that everyone says this is a 5-star film, you have to watch it. When I'm told that I have to watch something, I tend to not watch it. So I've always gone down the niche route of watching weird films and wacky ones and stuff that people are like, did you really watch that? And I'm like, yes, I did. Even if it has got a 2-star review, I will watch it. But I think it's come to a time in my life now where I feel like I need to start ticking off these blockbusters and really making an effort to watch them. So me and Dave, we've created a new series called Never Seen, and it's going to be over on Fresh Take Hub. And basically what it is it's taking me through these films. It's going to be everything from classic Disney films to classic horror movies to everything you could think of in that bracket when you think about some of the best films in the market. And I'm really looking forward to starting it with you, man. I think it's going to be a really good project. And in the process, I'm going to learn a lot more about myself and a lot more about these classic films.
And I think people at home will be experiencing the same sort of like gasping and frustration or, joy when Steve discovers these, because there's some pretty big films. We're talking the likes of Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Lord of the Rings, Lion King. That was the one that triggered it all off. So there's some pretty big films that Steve has never seen.
I'll be honest with you, Stephen. Some of the films you've mentioned, I haven't seen. I'm not going to say which ones, because I feel like that way people can decide whether or not they're going to make the attempt to hate me or not for it. But no, I completely understand. At the end of the day, I think films are often the sort of thing that you need to be sort of cultured into watching, especially with like the big blockbuster films. You often need like specific group mentality to often get into them to like continue the desire. So if you don't get that at a certain point, I completely understand, right? I think because like for me, an example would be the first Star Wars film I ever saw in full was Episode 3, because a friend convinced me to go to the cinema with them. And then after seeing that, I went and watched all of the other films.
I think that is the best approach sometimes, though, is to have a reason to watch those films as well. Like, I remember like with Indiana Jones, I watched all of them because Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was coming out, and that kind of, rather than just some people who say like, yeah, I've seen that, and you're like, well, what did you think? Oh, I just chucked it on when it was on in the background, or I just saw it on TV one day, so can you really say that you invested in it, or did you sort of like specifically say, I'm going to watch this without any expectations? So that can be a big part of it as well, is expectations, which we'll also be talking about today. So shall we get on to what today's episode is all about, guys?
Hell yeah.
We should.
On this week's episode of Well Good Movies, we wanted to delve into some of the films we preserved in our movie vault. Whether that means revisiting an old favourite or challenging ourselves to watch a film we've never seen before, each one of us wanted to see if these movies deserve their place in the vault and meet our expectations. Also, as it's Easter, we decided to talk about Easter eggs, but not the chocolate kind. No, me and Craig were challenged by Steve to pick our favourite hidden Easter eggs in films before taking a visit to Steve's Egg Emporium. So, what are some of my favourite Easter eggs? The first one that I have popped down is actually in a film that I just mentioned, was when the Ark of the Covenant shows up in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the Indiana Jones film, the fourth one, which again I know is like the least popular film and gets a lot of hate towards it. But it's a very gimmicky Easter egg. It's very obvious. It's kind of like an obvious cameo of that prop. But I just enjoyed that entire element of the film. When I recently rewatched Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's fun to end that film with that massive warehouse with all the boxes and all that kind of stuff of all these artifacts. And you always think like, ooh, I wonder what else is in there. So I always thought it was fun for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull to go, hey, let's go to that warehouse and let's go to get another artifact from here. So the fact that they're in that place, you just had to show the Ark of the Covenant. And the way they do it, again, it's not in some kind of gimmicky, stupid way. It's just that they're driving off. You see a box open and you see the Covenant is just there and it's shining. And they have like a little bit of music to be like, da-da-da-da, So I thought it was just a subtle one. It was nice. It wasn't like too niche for people to understand. I think pretty much anybody who's watching Indiana Jones could watch it and go, oh, yeah, that's fun. And another fun time that's appeared, it's also turned up in other Lucasfilm, George Lucas projects. It showed up in an episode of Clone Wars, actually, Star Wars, The Clone Wars. I think when Cad Bane is looking for his new outfit when he breaks out of prison with Obi-Wan and that weird alien guy, I can't remember the name of him now. And he's looking for a new hat, and I think he tries on Indy's hat at one point. But also the Ark of the Covenant is in the background as well, which is it's quite a fun one. And my second one is in Spider-Man 2 when they name drop Doctor Strange. And the reason that is one of my favorites now is just because of like the entire weird meaning that Easter egg has brought on is when J. Jonah Jameson and one of his editors or writers is coming up with an idea for a headline for Doc Ock. He's like, we need a name for this guy. And he's like, Science Squid. And then he says like, Doctor Strange. And he's like, that's good, but it's taken. And so it's so weird now that years and years later, Sam Raimi is directing the next Doctor Strange film because he directed Spider-Man 2. And even that film referenced the idea that it's taken. It's not even that he said, yeah, that's a good one. Oh, well, let's have something more related to his arms or anything. It's as if Doctor Strange or the comics existed within that Raimi universe, which is quite fun. And I think Raimi was asked about this in an interview and he said, yeah, it's weird how life turns out. So I just like the entire narrative of that Easter egg, that it was just put in there as a comic book reference, like, hey, here's a Marvel character. And then the fact that the director of that film is now actually making a Doctor Strange film all these years later is just a strange coincidence. And like Raimi said, it's just strange how fate turns out. So yeah, that's my two. Craig, what's some of your favorite Easter eggs?
So I probably have two that I would go to. I think one of the probably more obvious ones are some of the Disney films where, especially if they're, say, the sort of 90s era, such as Aladdin or Hercules, they basically try and reference some of their older characters by basically just bringing them in weird cameos. So I think the two that I can remember quite vividly are the genie basically transforming into like a variety of different characters in Aladdin. And at one point, he morphs into, I think he's either a cook or somebody related to the ocean. And he's basically has a crab, which is Sebastian the crab, and he's just basically flailing him about and just shooing him off. Although that pales in comparison to Hercules, where when he's posing in a lion's rug, that lion happens to just be the skin of Scar, which or like the fur of Scar, which I just love the image of just, hey kids, you know that awful lion you hated at the end of The Lion King? Well, we've turned him into a rug. I think the other thing for me would probably be the inadvertent Easter egg that ended up basically spawning a trilogy, which is the idea of the Cornetto trilogy. So obviously you have Shaun of the Dead, which was directed and generally written by Edgar Wright, and the idea of that film basically just being a zombie apocalypse happening to an incredibly ordinary guy, and you had him basically just, eating a cornetto at one point, and that just was seen as like an ordinary thing. And then the next film he did, again with very similar cast, still having Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, another character also eating a cornetto. To the point that people tried to basically thread these films together so vividly, basically then spawning The World's End, where everyone was basically just waiting for the cornetto to show up, and in what way it was going to show up, and it showed up brilliantly at the end as just a rapper flying in the wind of this apocalyptic world, which was just great. And also just the fact that there are loads of theories about the different flavors of cornettos, basically representing different genres of films. So it was strawberry cornetto in the first one, basically representing the idea of horror and gore because it was a zombie film. Then it was a whatever flavor blue cornetto is.
Just like milk, just normal like chocolate.
Yeah,
Vanilla.
Normal milk chocolate. For the middle movie, because it was like it was a mystery thriller action film.
It's like the blue is like police lights and all that kind of stuff, I suppose.
Yeah, and then finally green for World's End, because science fiction sort of alien sort of abduction sort of lights basically being that mint, which I just thought was a really really cool touch. They went to the effort of making sure that all of that could be done, and I thought that was a really cool Easter egg to include.
And the fact that you can buy them as the Cornetto trilogy, like the DVD box sets are called the Cornetto trilogy. And
and there's some fantastic art where they try and really utilize the Cornetto theme as well, which I'm pretty sure the brand must be loving this absolute advertising bomb that they've got.
Yeah, the only thing I was always disappointed with is that in The World's End, they didn't try to link in green a bit more to the storyline. So whereas like strawberry, red, blood, zombies, blue, police, all that kind of stuff. I wish that in The World's End, how the robots or aliens, whatever you want to call them, when their heads pop up, they have like blue liquid. I was like, why didn't you just make that green? And it could have tied in a bit more, because I was like, that's a bit unfortunate for me. It just seemed like there was a prime opportunity to use green with a liquid pouring out of bodies like that. But I don't know, maybe it didn't work well for the CGI or something like that, or it didn't blend well if they were doing stuff on green screen.
I mean, for me, overall, I was generally disappointed in the comparative quality of The World's End in comparison to the other two. So there's a lot of that going around.
Yeah, true.
So, Steve, what have you got prepared in your crazy, crazy world of Easter eggs?
So, Dave, welcome to my Egg Emporium, and first up we're going to be talking about Fight Club, also known as the famous Starbucks cup in every scene Easter egg. This is when director David Fincher claims that in every single scene of Fight Club, you shall see a Starbucks coffee cup. And now this is apparently a social commentary on the fact that everywhere you look in real life, you shall find a Starbucks coffee shop. Moving forward, we're going to be talking about The Departed, X Marks the Spot. The 2006 American crime film from Martin Scorsese is a favourite amongst film buffs. The New York Queens director opted to use an X to forebode that one of his characters was going to die. He was paying homage to Howard Hawks' original Scarface, which incorporated a bunch of X's to imply that death was imminent. Next up, we've got Sid the Bin Man in Toy Story 3. Do you remember in Toy Story 3 when the toys hide from the bin man? Well, that is in fact Sid collecting the trash, and he is even sporting the same skull t-shirt that he wore in the very first film. And to finish up, we've got a nice little Easter egg from Catch Me If You Can. And now this is when Frank is arrested in the movie. One of the officers is the real-life Frank Abagnale. An excellent egg to finish up on.
So, thank you for that, Steve, for the crazy little fun game to get us in the mood for looking out for interesting facts and fun Easter eggs and talking about some bizarre movies, which we always appreciate you bringing onto the podcast. But now we're going to talk about some famous movies as we go into the movie vault, as we talk about films that we decided to pick out of the vault by opening it up and choosing films we wanted to highlight or talk about, which might be ones that we've never seen before. So like we mentioned before with Steve, are these films that we haven't watched for a certain reason, or are we going in with any certain expectations or ideas about what this film is about and what it's meant to represent? So what was it like going into this film, which has got such a big legacy behind it, including the fact that it has been put into the movie vault, so we already know about it from that. So we've gone at this in a few different directions, and it'll be interesting today to talk about our experiences with these different films. So first off, I thought we would start with Craig. Tell us about your movie that you decided to fetch out to the vault.
So I love comedy, and I don't think I get to watch enough movie comedies anymore. So I was more than happy to basically go through the vault and see if there was one that stood out to me that I haven't watched. Then I saw this film, and I remembered the fact that I consistently rave about its stage musical adaptation, written by one of my favorite songwriter comedians. And I thought, well, this probably seems like the perfect time to actually get myself to watch it and fully engage with it. So the film that I ended up watching, as suggested by Daniel Cullinane, for our what to watch at home episode that we did, which is the last episode that David and I ever recorded in person with our guests, was the film Groundhog Day.
Groundhog time.
1,000 people freezing their butts off waiting to worship a rat.
Weatherman Phil Connors is spending the day in Puxatawney, Pennsylvania.
Phil? Ned Ryerson, I did the whistling belly button trick at the high school talent show.
Bing!
Bang!
But Phil's about to find out he's not just stuck in Puxatawny.
Will you be checking out today, Mr. Connors?
Chance of departure today, 100%.
He's stuck
Groundhog Day!
in Groundhog Day.
I'm reliving the same day over and over.
Phil?
Ned Ryerson?
Bang!
Do you ever have deja vu, Mrs. Lancaster?
I don't think so, but I could check with the kitchen.
Well, it's Groundhog Day. Again?
At first, he was a little anxious.
Phil? What?
Will you be checking out today, Mr. Connors?
I'd say the chance of departure is 80%.
But now,
We could do whatever we want.
he's discovering the possibilities
Don't you worry about cholesterol?
Why?
and living life like there's no tomorrow.
Phil Connors!
Ned!
Because there isn't.
I am an immortal. I have been stabbed, shot, burned, frozen, electrocuted. I'm a god.
You're God.
I'm a god. I'm not the god. He's out of his gourd.
But to get what his heart wants most
What are you looking for, Phil? A date for the weekend?
means living this day over again till he gets it right.
Believe it or not, I studied 19th century French poetry.
What a waste of time.
I studied 19th century French poetry.
La fille qui j'aimerais.
You speak French?
So, where to start with this film? So, this basically is the film famously starring Bill Murray and Annie McDowell, basically about the idea of Groundhog Day. So, a man having to live out the exact same day over and over and over for God only knows how long. What do I say about? So, what can I necessarily say about this film? First of all, I just need to sort of give a check just to know, like, have either of you? Okay, well, Stephen, I'll assume you haven't. David, have you seen this film?
Yeah, it's one of those which we mentioned before, which I've seen like parts of it on TV and stuff, but I've never sat down and been like, right, let's experience Groundhog Day. So I always consider it a film which I've not properly watched.
Fair.
I can confirm that I have not watched Groundhog Day either.
Cool. Yeah, so basically, Bill Murray is playing a weather presenter called Phil, who's incredibly cynical, basically a bit of a dick. But he has to go to Puxatawny in America to basically celebrate their festival of Groundhog Day, which is basically, for anyone who knows the myth, is basically getting a groundhog to determine how many more weeks of winter there will be. And they go there. He basically has massive contempt because the groundhog in question is called Puxatawny Phil, obviously also a weather predicting creature. So he has a lot of resentment against this thing. And they predict 6 more weeks of winter, which makes everyone sad. But then he basically tries to leave, but there's a big blizzard keeping him there. And then rinse and repeat, he starts experiencing this day over and over and over. So he literally wakes up every morning having to listen to Sonny and Cher's I Got You, Babe, and the banter on the radio that comes with it. And what I love about this, so first and foremost, I really enjoyed this film. It's quite light watching because it doesn't try and force anything on you because of the fact that it's literally just having to repeat the days over and over again. You can just see a lot of like the common threads going throughout it. There's no major breaks of clarity. You can actually see quite a good level of progression. So there's no like single moment where he goes, I need to do this. It's literally small things over those days just build up. So it's actually quite a really good piece of like developing character. But essentially he goes through a few phases. The first phase is the understandable what's going on, because everything is just acting the way he shouldn't be experiencing it, and he's basically freaked out. Then he gets drunk and realizes that there's basically no consequences to this day, and that's where he basically decides to just be more egocentric. This is where you get like the sort of famous clip of this film is where he's going through the street and there's that guy who knows him. He approaches him. It's like, Phil, is that you? Ned, punch. Just great moments like that. And he also just memorizes like the movements of the people in the town. So he's able to do things just like steal a lot of money and basically just spend it on whatever he wants. Then he realizes he can use this technique to basically pull women. Probably what I would consider the more uncomfortable part of the film, just because of things. But then once you sort of realize that the entire film's message is not, this is a good thing to do and sort of glorified, he basically gets shut down for his actions. You could tell that he really suffers for it. And I think that's one of the good outcomes of it. He basically realizes if he just goes up to women and asks them facts about their lives on the first day, the second day he can go back and just know all these things. So he just goes up to a woman in like a diner and just says like, "What's your name, Nancy? Who is your 12th grade English teacher? Mrs. Weathers or whatever it is." And he's like, "Cool, thanks." Next day he's like, "Nancy, hey, it's me, Phil. We're in the same English class together. You know, Mrs. Weathers." And just basically using those details, sort of getting in. But then that sort of spurs him on to realize that he's actually interested in his producer, played by Andy McDowell. And he basically just starts living out these days to try and learn what her perfect man is to basically try and seduce her. But it never works. So the furthest he gets is they're in the B&B together, and he's basically trying to get her into bed, and she always says no, because as far as she's concerned, this is the second day they've ever met. So, you know, fast. But basically, because he keeps trying to play out the day exactly as it was to get to that point where he could do something different, he ends up making mistakes throughout the day. So he never gets back to the B&B room, which basically sparks probably his hopeless stage. And this is the part where he tries to get out of the loop by kidnapping the Groundhog, kidnapping a truck, and driving himself, the truck, and this Groundhog off a cliff.
The other famous scene from this film of that, like, so shot.
Yeah. What my favorite part of it is it lands, it crushes. You can hear all of these horrible sound effects, and it's just silence. And then Larry, the camera guy, who's just been there for all of this, he leaves it a couple of seconds. I mean, they could be okay. Instant explosion. Like, obviously like a sort of tired joke in some areas, but I think it was just the timing of it that made it really work, to the point that they just left it so long to bring it up before the explosion actually happened. So yeah, he basically then just has his hopeless period where he just tries to die in a variety of weird ways, as you'd expect. There's one point where he basically takes a toaster to a bathtub. He basically tries to get run over by a car. He basically tries all manner of things, but he just keeps waking up in the morning. So eventually he just comes to this conclusion that he's a god and just cannot die. But thankfully, they don't do any stupid anymore. There's no consequences. I'm just going to rule over people. He basically tries telling Ruth, his producer, who he's falling for, about it. He manages to do it by basically going around everyone in the diner and explaining their lives and what's going on with them. The most notable being there's a pair of teenagers about to get married, but the one is unsure. And he's basically just going into a lot of descriptive detail. He's even counting down, look, in about 5 seconds, a waiter over there is going to drop a tray of glasses. And that happens. So eventually she believes him and basically just sticks around with him for the entire day, just seeing what's happening and just proving this. Then obviously he wakes up the next day and she's gone and her memory of this is all gone. So then we get the final phase, which is he's decided to improve his life. So he just does a number of things. Like he tries to save people's lives when he learns at what point in the day they're going to be in danger. Like he catches falling kids from trees. He goes into restaurants when a guy's choking and basically gives him the Heimlich. He does loads of things like this. He also decides to try learning skills to improve his own life. So he takes up ice sculpting and piano lessons, which is actually quite clever because he basically just goes for the same lesson every day, but it just accumulates over time. So at first he's terrible at playing the piano, but then once he's done it like about 30 times or whatever, he's becoming quite a pro, to the point that he's playing like a concert in the evening of one of the days, and his piano teacher's there. She's like, "I'm so proud he only started learning this morning." But my favorite thing about that is he goes to this piano teacher's house. He says, "Hi, I was hoping to learn the piano. Could you fit me in?" She's like, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I've got a student right now and we're booked up for the next couple of hours." And he said, "I'll give you $1,000. Just wait 1 second." Goes into the house, gets this girl, throws her out. Literally just pushes her out the door, and she's holding all of these like piano recital books, and she's there like Eventually then, because because he's also starting to be nice to his cameraman and his producer. Like he buys them coffee. He gives like the most beautiful sort of news address that anyone's heard, to the point that other networks stop actually recording themselves and just listen to this guy. And everyone's just moved, and this is where Ruth is just like, wow, this guy's sort of incredible. Then at like the party at the night, all the people that he's helped throughout the day basically just keep coming up to him and thanking him. Like the newlywed couple, they eventually go through with it because he talked to them and made them see sense. He got them a honeymoon gift, which was tickets to WrestleMania, which they both loved. Yeah, WrestleMania for some reason. They look like really sweet, innocent teens, and then he just gives them the envelope, and they're just like, WrestleMania tickets, yes! How did you know? And it's just really wholesome. And eventually then there's like a bachelor auction, which everyone starts bidding massively over Phil, but then Ruth basically just spends like, I think it's $333.88, something like that. Where basically he then spends the evening with her and basically says, look, no matter what happens, so long as I know I've made you happy, I don't care what happens next. So that's sort of his moment of revelation. And he wakes up the next day and it's a new day, and Ruth had stayed in the bedroom with him, and he's basically overjoyed. And that's the basic plot of Groundhog Day. Ironic that a film that basically covers the events of a single day has so much plot, but like, I genuinely loved it. Like, Bill Murray is just the perfect sort of dry, sarcastic wit kind of character. Actor. Because even though he sort of has like the same tone throughout all of it, there's just so much nuance to the way that he's just taking everything, that even though he's at the same tone, there's just so much emotional range. So he's just fantastic. Everyone else is sort of hard to evaluate on their performances, because oftentimes they are just having to repeat lines, but it was just like a lovable cast of characters and like so many beautifully eccentric people just out of nowhere. It's just really enjoyable. Although if I have to listen to Sonny and Cher's I Got You Babe one more time, I'm going to scream. Even on the day when like he wakes up and everything's gone back to normal, they're still playing that song. And I was like, guys, why would you do this? Although it's a different part of the song. So if for anyone who's like an eagle-eyed listener, they'll just go, it's changed. Oh, he's going to be so happy. Wait, he hasn't noticed. Oh, the banter has made him notice. Oh. Although it ends weirdly because because bear in mind, he's now with the producer and like she's sort of fallen for him. And he's just like, let's move to Puxatawny. It's beautiful here. I'm just like, dude, she's known you for like 2 days at this point. Simmer down with the let's move to a completely different part of the country.
I think what's interesting about a comedy is it makes it different in terms of expectations, doesn't it? There's not this kind of like, oh, it's got this big mantle on top of it, unless it is kind of like a Life of Brian, like this is one of the greatest comedies of all time. But so you can easily be surprised by the jokes or the humor unless you've had those gags ruined for you. So there's not this big weight of like a dramatic story or these big performances, so you can still as easily enjoy it or be surprised by it because there's not as much riding on it, I guess. Did you find that was the case? Or
I mean, for me, I think I was just more looking for how they handled the sort of personal ideas, because I think from like various like top 50 comedy movies of all time lists that Channel 4 used to do, I think I was sort of aware of like all of the jokes they necessarily would cover about the repetition of events. Things like I'm just going to start punching random people on the street. I'm basically going to just steal this money and get away with it. It's those sort of events. But I still find them funny and enjoyable. For me, it was just how do they handle the emotional storylines, and how does this sort of romance sort of develop for both characters, and how can they make that believable? So yeah, to an extent, I say that's the case.
For me, it's a film that I've never watched, and with many after today, but it's a film that I've always heard about, and others have always had good experiences with it. And I was just wondering, Bill Murray, when you said he is a good fit for this. I think you hit it on the head, because I couldn't really think of anybody else who could play that character, you know, with his sarcasm and his wit. I think they've got the casting on that character really well, and I feel like you feel pretty similar about that.
Yeah. That's why I'm intrigued about now seeing like the stage version as well, because I just don't know how they adapt a character to like that to one who is younger. I know for a fact he's younger in the stage version, which is a bit weird, but whatever, they think makes it work. But also how they're going to be able to keep the sort of same cynical edge of somebody who basically just has to sing every now and then. And like, he has some cracking songs. I'm obsessed with the soundtrack, but like, I don't know how you can just be the sort of person who just goes, I'm just going to casually count the movements of these security deposit delivery drivers and just count until the point where there's a blind spot so I can just steal bags of money. I don't know how you're going to be able to do that in a very jaunty way, or even just casually punching an insurance salesman on the street.
It brings a question on there. What would you do if you had no consequences and the same thing was happening to you? I mean, have you ever thought about that? What you guys would ever do?
This is a weird philosophical question to pound some,
especially for Craig.
What do you mean, especially for what you
like,
implying?
what
I don't.
Chaos could come from it. Don't let me remind you of your response to like, what would you do if you're on the Titanic?
Yeah, all right.
I can tell you what I'd do if that would help.
All right.
So I would make it my life goal to basically go to as many stores as I could in one day around an area and just take all the blue and red M&Ms out of the packet and just put them back and just really see if that would have any sort of disastrous effects to the world.
Okay.
I mean, as far as scope goes, it's not up there. No.
I'd probably just go for the obvious of, go in to see what the lottery is and then the next day winning the lottery.
Yeah, but presumably you wouldn't get much time to enjoy that money, right? Because
yeah, but you could just win the lottery every day.
Yeah, but you win the lottery at 8 o'clock at night. That gives you a couple of hours to get the money, spend the money in any significant way before you then fall asleep and wake back up.
Hell of a night.
To be fair, I'd like to change mine. After listening to Dave's, I feel like mine's a bit...
$1 million or M&Ms?
I think I know what mine would be. I think mine would just be, in the morning, messaging various people I'm attracted to, saying, look, I'm attracted to you, until somebody says they're attracted back, and just seeing... Because I think that gets round the sort of ethical issues of you getting information to use against them. Because if I just ask them there and then whatever happens that day, I haven't abused anything.
You're just taking the chance, and then if the cycle ends, then oh, well, I know this information now.
Yeah, but also, if I tell someone I really like you and they say I'm really uncomfortable with this information, next day, I just don't tell them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, everything's fine.
Yeah, lastly, I would say just... Obviously, I think something important we're talking about these films as well is when you watch them as well, is the context they went into the movie vault with. Because again, we're not saying this is a vault full of just the greatest films of all time, because they go in there like, oh, this is to represent this is to represent that. So obviously you also mentioned that it is a very chilled movie. So it does sound like it went in at the right time as well. So do you think it deserves this place in there for the reasons it went in? Or for any
I mean, after an entire year of what I can imagine for people, it just feels like waking up and is the exact same day. I think it's more than earned its place. Yeah, I think Cullinane did us a solid there by bringing us that film.
He psychically predicted the next year, even though he thought everything would be fine by June. He actually deep down knew Groundhog Day would be.
Oh, he just cursed us. What he did is he put Groundhog Day into this, and it's just like, that's the effect we now live in.
So yeah, that was Groundhog Day, which Craig agrees deserves its place in the movie vault, and he thoroughly enjoyed. We'll now go on to our next one. So we'll go to yourself, Steve. What did you choose from the movie vault?
So I chose the classical Sweeney Todd, the 2007 version, where Tim Burton created a musical masterpiece, if you would. And I believe you and Craig picked this one for the vault in the episode of what movies didn't make the vault. So that's quite interesting.
This is the tale of an ordinary man who had everything
Barker, his name was. Benjamin Barker.
until a man of power stole his freedom, destroyed his family, and banished him.
May the Lord have mercy on your soul.
For life. And in his sorrow, a new man was born.
15 years dreaming I might come home to a wife and child.
Benjamin Barker.
Not Barker. Sweeney Todd now. And he will have his revenge. Where's my wife?
She's gone. And he's got your daughter.
Judge Turpin.
You've got to leave this all behind you now.
No. These are desperate times. And desperate measures are called for.
All right. You, sir? No one's in the chair. Come on. Sweeney's waiting. I want you, bleeders. You, sir? Two, sir. Welcome to the grave. I will have vengeance. I will have salvation.
I'm not really a fan of musicals. I never really have been. So I started this journey expecting it to be a tough watch. And in the beginning, it was giving me those vibes, but I sort of softened up to it. And I like the musical numbers, the mix with the acting, the mix with the actual storyline. I feel like it worked really well. So as far as musicals go, for me, it was very much one of the best ones I've seen. And I think it's a lot to do with how it's presented, how Tim Burton sort of presents Johnny Depp. And, you know, he really does make him the star of the show. And Johnny Depp had a lot of challenges for this movie. He isn't a singer by trade. He had to learn that craft. And I think he did a really good job in sort of pulling it off. And I think the musical aspect of the film stands out straight away. I mean, you have a song for pretty much not every scene, but pretty much every scene there's a song. So it has to be good, but it also has to be good for the story. And I think the way the acting sort of combines with the musical numbers, it really does do it justice. But obviously, you know, Tim Burton didn't create this film. It's the first one sort of appeared in 1930 and then another one in 1980. And then even then it was sort of this tale. It was a Victorian character, if you would. And it found itself into literature, into film, and eventually even a fake version found itself to America, where someone took a novel and took Sweeney Todd and did an American version of it, which would be an interesting read if anybody ever had that copy. But yeah, I think Tim Burton does the whole process justice. He really does come through with a great telling of the original story. And it's noted that he keeps a lot of the features in there from the original. Like, for example, Sweeney Todd in his barbershop, he has a trap door. He's always had a trap door in the retelling. So he kept that in there, it's just little nods like that, which made the film that little bit extra special. Yeah, some scenes throughout the film, really. Let's talk about the opening scene. There's no place like London, where you've got Sweeney Todd coming into London on this, what can only be described as a ghost ship, because it doesn't look like a normal ship, but that's just the smog of Victorian London. So yeah, you've got this scene with Sweeney Todd and Anthony coming into London, and Anthony is so glad to be back. He's singing his little heart out that, you know, this is his town, this is London, there's no place like it. And then you've just got the sinister undertones of Sweeney Todd creeping in, and then he just changes the complete flow of the musical number. And that's when you start to think this is going to be a very dark, a very classic Tim Burton film, where he remixes it and puts his own sort of thoughts in it. And someone like Johnny Depp really brought that out. And that's what I really thought to myself in that first scene. I thought, I'm going to enjoy this, even though it's a musical and it's not really my sort of forte. I think I'm going to enjoy the darkness of it almost. And you can tell that in the sequence, when it's opening, the sequence is very dark themed, and I thought to myself, I'm going to enjoy this. As far as musicals go, I think this one, when you're doing your research and when you're looking at it, it's got such high praise from critics, and it got a lot of nominations, a lot of Oscar nominations, and yeah, it was a really good watch that I would I'm thoroughly glad I picked from the vault, and I'm glad I got to experience it and sort of tick it off my list, if you would.
What was your experience, like you said, what was the hesitancy with musicals in the past? Because a lot of people can, just as a genre, just be like, I just don't like singing and dancing, or they just don't like the lightheartedness of them, or the lack of story. Like you pointed out, this can fix that for a lot of people, because at least it's more darker and it's got more story to it, so they don't mind the music then as much. But there might still be people out there who are like, no, I still can't deal with the music. Like I knew somebody who was like a massive South Park fan, but would literally rewind through the music and songs of the South Park movie because they just couldn't stand singing and dancing that much, whereas it was still in one of their favorite cartoons. So how did you come along on that? What was your past feelings on musicals?
Yeah, so my past feelings on musicals, and I've just never really vibed with them. I think The Sound of Music I have watched, and I just didn't really like it. And even going into my teen years, when when High School Musical was big, for example, I just never jumped on the bandwagon because I just never really enjoyed singing. I found it cringy, and sometimes I still to this day I just want to see acting. I don't want to see musicals, but I think you've got to be more open going into it. And with this one, which it works so well as a musical, and it did amazing on Broadway. I think you have to realize that the music is a part of the film in itself. If you take the music out, maybe it won't be as good, because you've got some great songs in there and some great soundtracks that are really meant to be in the film, and it kind of helped convey the story a little bit better. You've got Sweeney Todd giving a shave and he's singing, and you're sort of looking at his actions as well as him singing, and it just blends together quite nicely. What I did to not get through this movie, but what I found helped is looking at the actions, what they were doing when they were singing. So it wasn't just, you were watching someone stand still and maybe just sing a song. They were just doing other stuff to keep you entertained. And that's what I liked about this particular film. It sort of focused in on the action, and it honed in on what the actual characters were doing, opposed to just the singing, which you see in some other musicals.
Yeah, and I guess actually, a good way of differentiating them is also knowing the name of it, which we probably should have mentioned before in the past when we put it in the vault, is that it is Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, and that is the name of the original musical, which is based on. So again, I know Craig has a lot of knowledge and feelings towards the original musical, which sort of helped him to appreciate this one a bit more, because it's originally from Steven Soderheim. So what are your thoughts on the original, Craig, with what sort of facts or info can you give us about the stage version?
Well, before I give you facts on the stage version, I basically just want to fact check one thing Stephen said. It did indeed win an Academy Award. It was for Best Art Design, which makes sense considering there are no original songs in the film. So it would be a bit of a rip if it won Best Original Song for things that didn't exist. There were also nominations for Johnny Depp as Best Lead, which I thought was quite interesting. It is a really good performance, but I'm surprised, but in a sort of good way, that the Academy would sort of recognize it as one, just because a lot of it is done in the manner of the songs. There's not as many like emotional beats apart from just outside of the songs. However, one thing I think that the film does that I think probably would have helped Stephen enjoy it a bit more, because it makes itself less typical to the other other musicals. Actually, I'll see if Stephen noticed this. All of the song numbers in the film, was there anything you noticed that was a bit odd about it, as opposed to, say, I know you haven't watched many musicals, but the musicals that you said you've seen Sound of Music, right? What was something that Sound of Music had that, say, Sweeney Todd didn't?
I don't know if I'm correct, but was the Sound of Music, did they actually sing that there and then, and it wasn't pre-recorded?
No. No, that was a technique that only really started with Les Miserables in 2012. No, I mean the type of songs. I'll see if David knows what I mean.
Isn't it? This one doesn't have any chorus songs.
Yeah, there's no ensemble. The original stage musical had ensemble songs, so they had like chorus. So you know the music that's playing over the introduction. You know they have the mechanisms with the blood.
Yeah.
That song has lyrics. Those lyrics are great, but they are not sung in the Tim Burton version because it was sung by the ensemble. Go and listen to it out, because I think it's just a great introduction to the film. I understand why it wouldn't have worked for Burton, but I think it just works for like going into listening to. It's literally called Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. But listen to it; it's a cracking song. But I think that probably would have helped you, because once you take out the ensemble, it focuses all the songs onto being character pieces, which means that, exactly as you say, you focus on when they're singing them, why they're singing them. It doesn't look as frivolous as opposed to if you just have like random people dancing on the street. I think the closest you probably get to that is, granted, my favorite scene, because I think it's stupid, is the Adolfo Pirelli, the King of the Barbers. That's probably the closest you get to sort of frivolous. But even then, I love the character. It's so stupid.
Yeah, it's a great scene. Just this Italian sport, wherever he's from, just walking out in his blue massive suit, and just I really like that scene as well.
Especially for a film that's so dull and grey and drained of colour and character up until there, and then you have this big, huge character come out with,
played by Sacha Baron Cohen.
Yes, yeah.
Probably the last thing I would say then about like the original stage version, or at least the version that I've seen a recording of, the staging was done in a really unique way. They had essentially all of the sets basically built into one giant cube, and when they wanted to change the scene, they would just spin the cube around, which I thought was cool. And I wish the film, obviously it would have no way of being able to replicate that effect, but I wish there was some way that could be paid homage to. But it doesn't matter. I thought the film was great.
Yeah, I think it still feels quite contained, which is good. But like you said, you do lose that. And I think, like you said, Craig, that's why the ensemble works so well on stage, etc., because they sort of bring you into that atmosphere. You're in like a theatre and it's echoing off the walls, etc. But here it works because it sort of grounds it more and it appeals to people who aren't big musical fans. I think that transitions nicely into one of the other elements of the film, which I know the people I've watched it with have had before, which we mentioned already about the music. I remember one of my old housemates said, "Oh, I didn't realize it was a musical, so when I watched it years ago, I just turned it off once I realized." And I was like, well, come on, you were attracted to the story and to the film itself, at least give it a chance. So, we watched it years later, and again, he was the same. He was like, yeah, that one isn't so bad because it's helped by the characters, the story, but also the violence. I remember watching this originally, I think, as like, it was like Halloween or something, and it wasn't long after it came out, and I thought, oh, what a great film to watch on Halloween. And yeah, it was, because there's a lot of like blood and violence in it. So what did you make of that, Steve?
Yeah, I went off and watched, when they do kill counts for movies on YouTube and you watch one of them, I watched one of them. And I think it was double-figured kill count with 2 women being killed and the rest men. And some of the brutality of the killings they were up there. Yeah. And you'd think it's just a quick slit of the throat, but there is a lot of blood there, and they've had a lot of special effects come in. I think, the one that really stood out for me, and it stands out for everyone because it's such a dramatic killing, is spoiler alert. I'm going to say that now, but is the killing of the judge, and just how graphic that is of him going, "Benjamin Barker." Yeah. He just shoves it in his throat repeatedly, and blood splatters everywhere and over Todd, and that really stayed with me. And I was in the film, I was thinking, why is this an 18? I got to like an hour in maybe before anyone gets killed, or 40 minutes, whatever it is. And I was thinking, this just seems like a 15. But then I saw the brutality and I was like, okay, this is deserving of the age rating.
Yeah, because that was the thing, but before it came out, a lot of people, I think even the studio was kind of like, this is not going to be easy to sell to audiences, especially because some of Tim Burton's fans can be younger or like teenagers. But he was like, no, like, we need to have this. It is essential to the character. You need to have the violence. He's slitting people's throats. There's no other way around that, which I think is great, because it goes to show, again, it's not that kind of like gratuitous use of violence, which some filmmakers are accused of. It's Tim Burton, who again is like a dark, gothic sort of storyteller who hasn't really used that kind of violence before, but it goes to show that he's still willing to use it when the time is right. And yeah, it makes sense, because if you do slit somebody with the throat, then it is going to sort of like gush out like that. There's no sort of like getting around that. And again, it's a big draw actually for a lot of people who are not fans of the musical side. It adds to that sort of brutality and to the darkness of the story, which I think is good. And that scene you mentioned, probably another one which might have helped Depp towards his award nomination. I think an element of that, when you mentioned it, Craig, was as well, at that time, Johnny Depp was kind of one of those actors where the Academy's like, we want to reward this actor, we want to like show that he's done a lot of good stuff. And, you know, this film comes along in which he does a good performance, which, again, might not be, say, Oscar-worthy, but they're willing to make it Oscar-worthy because they want to, award that actor just for his body of work. And at that time, he was, like, quite a big name. So I think that is interesting as well. And like you said, Steve, he's not actually really a singer or anything, but I think he manages to pull it off because, again, the type of songs that they're doing, it's more about speaking the story and what he's thinking rather than just putting on this big vocal performance, which I think is impressive as well.
Well, if we're going to be talking about actors who aren't singers but manage to get through it by singing, we've got to talk about Alan Rickman.
Yeah, we have to speak about Alan Rickman, and possibly what me and Dave have been doing all week to each other is when we'll take on versions of Alan Rickman on voice notes and just sing the Pretty Woman song that him and Johnny Depp do. Make so good.
Yeah, that was a frequent joke, as I said with my housemates years ago, of just that Pretty Women, and like how they're just mentioning different things, flower picking, so we'd just be like making tea, making coffee, silhouetting. That's always my favorite one, silhouetting. Like it's just, oh, look at the silhouette of that woman.
Yeah, it's a very striking song. I've been listening to a bit of the soundtrack on Spotify, and the way that song starts off is so dark, and you're thinking, when's he going to do it? When's he going to actually do the job? And it's nice because it gets more cheery and it gets more on. And that's when I started to think, okay, maybe this isn't the scene he's going to eventually do it, because it's just too cheery a song to kill someone.
Yeah. Oh, the beauty of that being the point. Oh, it's such a tense scene. I love it. And then obviously ruined by that idiot Anthony just running in.
But like I said, you wouldn't then maybe get the violence of that moment that he has later on, because he says in that moment, doesn't he? He's just like, I should have just done it. Why did I wait, etc. As if he was going to do a quick revenge kill. And you're like, well, if you want revenge, it wouldn't have been worth it just to quickly get it done. So at the end, then makes him know what's happening in that situation, etc. On the music, was there anything else that stood out to you in terms of the songs, or just the style as a whole?
Yeah, in terms of songs, I really love the scene. I think it's called the song, My Friends, when he's got his blades and he's sort of bringing them up to the light, and that's almost like Sweeney Todd growing stronger and sort of the darkness, the monster coming out. So that was a really song that stood out for me. And in the whole term of the style of it, I just really liked how it matched everything about the film. I think almost every song had an element of darkness to it, even if it was presented in a cheery fashion. So even with Miss Lovett, she might be singing in a cheery way, but it's the actual context of what she's speaking about, which is what makes it dark, and that's in a sense what makes Sweeney Todd. So I just love the whole style of the musical numbers, and I think it fitted really well with the film.
Yeah, By the Sea, I definitely think has like a great air of that. Talking about basically being meant to be having this sort of idyllic little life, but even then it just feels dark and bleak.
That's one of my favorites, and it's probably the most Burton-esque in a way as well, because you've literally got two like goths on a beach, like in swimwear, and it's all bright and sunny, but they look like ridiculous in that situation.
Do you want to know who one of the original actresses to play Mrs. Lovett was on stage?
I think I remember this.
Angela Lansbury.
Yeah.
AKA Murder, She Wrote, the voice of Mrs. Potts in Beauty and the Beast, was Mrs. Lovett.
But this is interesting because obviously you read online and they say, Helena Bonham Carter only got the role because she was going out with Tim Burton, but she actually auditioned for the role. And I think she was quite worthy of it. If we're speaking about casting and stuff like that, I think his singing was really good in it. I think that was something that stood out for me, was how strong that came across.
For me as well, the story as a whole just works quite well because it leads up to that finale. And looking at the track list, I was kind of like surprised. I was like, oh, it's not really until the actual end of the album that you get, My Friends and Lil Priest, so it's not really until like the last act that it all really starts to turn into the like we are making people into pies kind of stuff. By the Sea comes in. That's when like the orphan sings the song about like how he'll protect Mrs. Lovett. So that's why I always enjoyed about like, well, where's this going? It's all building up to this, and that final act really like wraps everything up perfectly just in that cellar essentially of, that's when the kid comes in. It makes sense why he sung that song, why that weird lady has been singing the entire time, why Mrs. Lovett has been like gushing over Sweeney Todd so much. It comes together really, really well, I think.
How bad did those pies look in one of the beginning scenes though, in that song? And the cockroaches are crawling all over it and there's green on it.
Yeah, it's like a nail sticking out or something, isn't there? And you're like, oh.
They do look a lot better when they start using, should we say, better ingredients?
One scene that they decide to make needlessly graphic in comparison to any of the original musical versions is, when, why can't I remember the daughter's name?
Joanna,
of course it's Joanna. It's had the entire song called Joanna. How did I forget? When they were when he's rescuing her from the asylum, and basically what happens to the guard?
Oh yeah. When with all of his, what does he call him? He calls them as like children or something. Yeah.
And they basically just like gouge him to death, right? That's not how he dies in the stage musical. He just gets shot. Just like,
they're just like, nope, this film isn't about guns. This is about knives and like slitting people's throats.
It's like Burton saw that. It's just like that's kind of dark. But what if, guys? What if we did this? Well, some would call you a psychopath. And your point being? All right, Tim, do it.
I kind of wish it was Anthony in that role because, that you just brought up bad memories of that song, Joanna, and it just went on for way too long. Or maybe it was just him saying her name for too long. It was...
See, I've always thought that with that song, but actually when I re-listened, because we were talking so much about Pretty Women as the song, and so I like re-listened to that, and when it like continued, maybe the album was on shuffle or something like that, and it went to Joanna, and I always found that in the musical, you kind of like, oh yeah, it's just like the love ballad. But I did actually come to appreciate that a lot more because the rhythm and actual melody of the song is actually really nice. And because, like Craig said, because there's no like big ensemble pieces, it does actually turn into quite a big song by the end in terms of like turning quite triumphant and quite eclectic at the end. And I was like, so I did come to appreciate it a bit more. I think maybe in the film itself they could have done maybe more to make it visually interesting, but the actual song I came to appreciate a bit more because the actual melody is really nice.
Same for me. The song that I think goes a bit too long and grates on my nerves is Greenfinch and
Mockingbird or something.
No,
like that.
it's like Linnet Bird or something like that. Yeah. But I'm not sure if that's a thing. That's the song I'm just like, okay, this is cool, but it just feels a bit too it's a bit too symbolic for me. All it is literally Joanna just observing these birds who are freedom. I'm just like, could you just make it a little bit more about you, please?
Yeah. It's a bit too kind of floaty and just too simplistic.
What I really liked about this film is, how Judge Turpin and Beadle Bamford, they were just two hateable characters from the moment go. Like, and it's a scene that stays with me is, they're having that costume party and what goes on and the judge does what he does. From that moment, I just was really looking forward to when the Beadle eventually got killed because he was my least favorite character because he was just such an arsehole throughout the entirety of the film. Even when he's judging the shave competition, he's just so pompous with it. And it almost comes through the screen. You're just like, oh, I can't wait till you get the razor.
Poor Timothy Spall. He never plays like a nice guy, does he? He's like Wormtail in every film he's in. He's just always there like, I
just kept looking at him being like, shut up, Peter Pettigrew.
Exactly. So, Steve, finally, what was your expectations going into it? Do you feel that it deserves this place in the vault? So even though we put it in as films that didn't make it in, it came from that musical episode, and part of that episode was a bit about stage to film adaptations, and a lot of people will highlight it as one of the better stage to film adaptations. So do you think it deserves to go in on the basis of a great musical? And is there any other elements do you think that it deserves to go in, especially based on what you were expecting going in? Did it change your expectations? Was it different? Was it matched?
I think when I initially started the film, or made the decision that I was going to pick Sweeney Todd, I wanted to push myself out my comfort zone because like I said before, I don't watch musicals, or I have very limited experience with them. So when I eventually got into the film, I realized that it was quite an enjoyable sequence, and it told the story really well through the music and through the characters and through the events. And I think it's fully deserving of a place in the movie vault. I think not just from, all the plaudits it's got in the past, but just from how it can take someone who isn't an avid musical fan and maybe slowly start turning them. And that's what it did. It made me, it's very rare that I will go onto Spotify and type in a soundtrack of a film. And that's what I've been doing this week. Yeah. So for me, that was quite striking. And that's when I sort of realized that this film resonated with me and something that I really did enjoy. 100% fully deserving of a place in the movie vault. And yeah, I think everyone involved did a great job. And Tim Burton can be proud, Johnny Depp can be proud, and everyone else involved in that movie can be really proud.
Yeah, Steve enjoyed Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, which is in the movie vault. And we now go on to our last film, which is the film I decided to watch. So the one I went with was from our Joker episode, where we were talking all about the character and was linked to when the film was coming out, directed by Todd Phillips, starring Joaquin Phoenix, Joker. And this was placed as a suggestion by our guest, Kyle Sean Thomas. And it is the 1928 film, The Man Who Laughs. Definitely one of the oldest films we have in the vault, and the oldest film we're talking about today, which makes it very different. And we were obviously talking so much about the DC comic book character in that episode. We were talking about the different iterations with Heath Ledger and Mark Hamill, etc. So most of the stuff we were discussing and put into the vault in that episode with the different Batman films and different representations. So this one always really stood out to me because I appreciated that Kyle brought in that extra element of here is an inspiration for the character of the Joker, a character who is, from a French novel, which was made into a film. And then the look of the character in that film is what inspired many of the drawings and depictions of the Joker when the character was created for the comics. And you can definitely see how that has stuck with the character this entire time within his publication history and also his film history. So I was really intrigued to go back to this because it's obviously a silent film, especially. So it was striking to me that a silent film made such an impression in terms of like a visual character. It wasn't just like where we've talked previously about Charlie Chaplin, etc., because there again it's comedy and it's sort of used in terms of like the same character, the tramp and all that kind of stuff, or a lot of silent films will be a lot shorter. But this is an hour and 50 minutes as well. So, it's quite a big silent film. And, especially when you just have to have those title, the cards of just what the characters are saying, that's quite a long time to do that for. And this is also remembered and lauded for being a very famous sort of dark, gothic sort of romance. But also a lot of people have mentioned it as one of the first sort of like horror sort of films, or it's got a lot of horror tropes. And I can understand why they've said that, because you can see that this did maybe lead to things like Frankenstein, like Dracula, the idea of, the sympathetic sort of female roles within it, but also the outcast character who is a freak to everyone else and they can't accept him. That element and just his appearance in general is quite horrific. But it doesn't really have anything that's actually scary or like, jump moments or anything like that. But going into it, I wasn't sure if there would be that. So that's why I chose it, because I was like, well, how much is going to actually be scary or dark about this film, considering it was made in 1928 and it's a silent film? Because sometimes it does appear on those lists of films which you get, which are like films that couldn't be shown or were hidden from society, because possibly when this was first released, there was a lot of people who were just freaked out by the general look of a man who basically can't stop smiling. So for those who don't know, the basic premise of The Man Who Laughs is that there is a character who is called Gwynplaine. Forgiveness for, if I mispronounce any of these characters' name, but again, it's a silent film, so I can't hear how they're actually pronounced. And so at the beginning, we see that there's like this king. He's told by his sword jester that a character has been found, and it's like a lord. So he's maybe been like taken hostage previously, and they found him. And when he goes to speak to this hostage, he's asking about his son, and the king tells him that his son has been sort of disfigured by characters which I believe are called Camprachico. So basically they're kind of like gypsy travelers who would like mutilate and alter people for the purposes of like entertainment and circuses and shows, so they could sort of make money from them and that kind of stuff. So they give this boy to these set of people. There was a specific doctor who then changed it so that his mouth looked like he had a permanent grin and looked like he was constantly laughing. And this was done because they felt that his father was a fool. So they did it at the expense of his father to say, wouldn't it be funny if he was to laugh forever at his fool of a father? So when this guy comes back, who's actually a lord, the king essentially kills him because he's potentially a threat to how much like he's entitled to as a lord and that kind of stuff. We then see that the people who did this to Gwynplaine are being chased out of the country because of all the crimes that they've done. So all these people, so like gypsies, etc., get onto a boat and they abandon the child because they say this is basically evidence of what we've been doing. And then Gwynplaine goes out. He's on his own in the snow and the cold. He finds an old woman who's got like a baby in her arms. The woman is dead. The child is potentially like on its last legs. So Gwynplaine takes this baby with him as well. He then eventually comes across this sort of traveling cart, and inside there is a man who is known as Ursus, and he's basically like a playwright, performer. He takes them both in. He gives them food. He notices that the baby is unfortunately blind, and that's sort of our premise, our start into the story. So yeah, all joys and rainbows, guys.
Sorry, that's only the start.
Yeah, but very much kind of like I said, your old gothic fairy tales and that kind of stuff is like these horrible circumstances for these characters. But we jump several years into the future, and at this point then Gwynplaine and the girl who's called Dee, which is D-E-A, they sort of work with Ursus, and they help him with his shows and everything like that. And Gwynplaine has basically become this character known as the Man Who Laughs. So he's the sort of title character, and he's known then across the land or the country as the Man Who Laughs because of his infamous grin. And he puts on this sort of act, and they put on these kind of shows which are like sort of mythology kind of shows, and saying about like Dee also plays like sort of angelic type characters, and Ursus is able to write in these sort of like epic stories, and then the Man Who Laughs comes in as this big like sort of character which makes people laugh and sort of get attached to him, and they sort of enjoy him. And eventually all of this, as they're going around, they become a part of like a traveling carnival. So he's known as like the Laughing Man, and we see that there's like in this carnival, there's obviously like freak shows and that kind of stuff. And there's a man who takes notice of him because he's got one of those shows in which he's got things like a 5-legged cow and, different lions and tigers, and, and he's got little people, etc. And he's basically P.T. Barnum, well, from The Great Showman. And he recognizes Gwynplaine, though, basically, and he actually turns out to be the character who give him that permanent grin. So he is one of those Comprachicos people. He tells Ursus about this, and he says that he wants to like speak to Gwynplaine, but he sort of keeps him away from him. So the doctor who disfigured him decides to take this information to the queen. So the king has now died. There's a queen and there's a duchess also at this kingdom. And basically he writes a note to say that I know the living heir of this lord who died, and he is basically the lord and heir of your fortune and your estate. And once essentially the jester is still around, who told the king about the lord coming back and all that kind of stuff, he's now got himself as like the queen's sort of second-hand man, and the sort of, he's got himself more of a higher ranking role within the estate and everything like that. So he uses it to his advantage, and he wants to give himself more power. And he says that the duchess who lives there is basically going to have to marry Gwynplaine in order to keep her role as duchess, etc. So the queen decrees that this man must be captured and taken in so that they can marry off the duchess to Gwynplaine. And that all leads to then later on he's captured and everything. Ursus and Dee thinks that he's been killed. So they leave the country. They're told that they have to go by the morning, otherwise they'll be killed. So they start to go on a boat. But then eventually Gwynplaine struggles to get on board with this marriage and being turned into a lord, because everyone starts laughing as soon as they see the massive grin and smile he has on his face. And he basically runs out of the court. And there's also this other lord who's kind of like encouraging him to go, because basically he was previously meant to hook up with the Duchess, so he kind of wants him out of the picture so he can get back with the Duchess. He runs away. The jester kind of starts running after him with all the armies and everything like that. But thankfully Gwynplaine is able to get on the boat before it completely leaves the harbour, and he reveals himself to Ursus and Dee, who are overjoyed to see him, and they have a happy reunion, and him and Dee can now get married and live their happy life together. Whereas the jester, which I'll get onto later, suffers a horrible, horrible death, and it is a fantastic death because of one certain character, which I'll highlight later. But yeah, this is quite, like I said, from you could tell, a very dark film. It gets more, like I said, the opening is very grim, and the story, the idea itself is very tragic. But it's kind of like a Hunchback of Notre Dame sort of situation. It's very much like this disfigured character who's cast out by society, but you still then have like a lot of heart and happy sort of moments brought in more through the romance and the sort of bigger picture of the courts and the kings and the queens and all that kind of stuff, the circus and the shows that they put on. So again, it doesn't turn into like a kind of Dracula, Frankenstein, like a horror story. It turns into very much a kind of melodrama, this sort of like romantic situation in which it's, they're torn lovers, they want to get married, Dee and Gwynplaine, but they're torn apart, and he's trying to be made up into a lord and that kind of stuff, which is interesting, and it makes sense to the time. They were telling a lot of those kinds of stories, and especially because it's from a novel. But I think the strengths of the film really are just in the image of the man who laughs. He's got such a striking look, and like I said, Google this as soon as we've finished here, because it's actually, it'll stay with you, and you can see why it inspired Joker. And that's why it made sense for Kyle to bring it up, because just the look alone, and it's unfortunate that he doesn't get more moments within the film to do it, but they at one point show the man who laughs on stage doing his bit in his show, and he sort of makes himself up in white, and he does look terrifying. He's got like these really big teeth, and he's sort of like, he's got like this huge grin, sort of like black kind of lips, like all black around his eyes. He's got like sort of swept back hair, so he pretty much does look like the Joker. And there's a part where he sort of goes into the curtain and you just see his head. There's other moments where he's sort of dressed in black and he's on the side, and it's strange to have a character that you don't know what their emotions are as much, because you're like, oh, he's happy. Oh, wait, no, he can't do anything else bar happy. So you get these really tragic and really impactful moments in which he's like crying and looking like distraught and horrified, but he has no option to have this like horrific smile. So when people are there like laughing at him and making fun of him, or he's distraught because he's taken away from D, he's literally just there like with this huge grin on his face and like tears pouring down his face, and he's like doing this big physical performance. So it's very gothic and dramatic in that sense. So yeah, I think the imagery of it is really impactful, and what it does to set up later horror films, I think it's also important to be in the vault, because it does seem to act as a lot of inspiration for then later horror stories and like monster stories and that kind of stuff. And it does have a lot of nice and touching themes to it. The fact that D is blind leads to a lot of nice messages throughout the film. So the fact that, you know, their relationship is based on the fact that she will sort of like feel his face, and they say that she's the only one who can see the true Gwynplaine. She's not affected by how he looks. She can see the man inside, and that's why he is so attached to her and loves her so much, because she's not fazed at all by his appearance, and she just sees him for who he really is. And there's many times in which she does feel his face and sort of feels the grin and everything, and she sort of sees that with affection, whereas everyone else kind of looks at him and laughs, which I kind of think is weird. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think that's particularly funny. I think it's like scary, but every time he goes on stage, everyone's like, he doesn't do anything, by the way. It's just he comes on stage and it's literally like, and everyone's like, ah, like pissing themselves with laughter. And I'm like, what's so funny about that?
I mean, I've seen pictures of it. It looks genuinely horrifying.
Yeah.
What I've noticed from like the pictures I've seen is that it puts a lot of emphasis on who is the actor, did you say?
I didn't say the actor, but the one who plays him is Conrad Viet.
Yeah. There's a lot of emphasis on like how he does his eyes. Because like I've seen two different images. One is like where he's, you know, meant to be happy, and the other one where he's a bit distressed. He does a really good way of differentiating through how his eyes look. I was just wondering, like, because you said about struggling with some of the emotions throughout, were there like any moments you could definitely tell like what was actually trying to be conveyed?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think it's more just because you're so used and it's ingrained in you to just sort of read a person's face through their mouth, eyes, etc. There's just a strange experience to kind of like not look at like, oh, I have to like look at his eyes and remember that he's always like that. It's more just an immediate reaction. You see him smiling, you think, oh, he's happy, and then you're like, oh wait, he's crying, and you remember. So it's just more like getting used to that, which is an interesting experience.
Yeah, so this film I actually put on my own personal list of films to watch after going through the Well Good Movies podcast. And, you know, after listening to your version of it, it's just nothing I was expecting at all. I think listening to the actual podcast and thinking about how silent films are and how old school films are, it sounds relatively quite horror-based and quite a scary film in a sense.
Yeah, that's what I think is good about the expectation element, because I had a lot more horror type of expectations, and seeing this kind of maybe like Elephant Man type story and seeing like these horrific things. But really, again, it turns into this more gothic drama. There's so much emphasized on him and Dee as the relationship, and there's so many times in which you'll see him leave and Dee is kind of distraught and she's sort of holding on to like his clothes and like smelling things, and they play this like big like music and like anthem throughout it. And obviously silent films are helped a lot by their score. I do want to point out that the people who recently re-released this like on home media, etc., they did have an orchestra like redo the soundtrack for it, a version, so you could watch either one. I watched the original one with the original sound, and even though you've got like the hiss and everything and it doesn't sound quite as good because it's obviously so old, there's something you lose when I went and looked through parts of it with the orchestrated version, because it just makes it more detached from the actual film and it just doesn't sync quite together as much, and it's just weird to have this high quality sound paired with something that's so old and vintage. So I would say if you've got the choice to watch the original audio. The new one is nice to listen to, and even they actually do it in some scenes, say where there's a scene in a court and they've got like a band playing like flutes and different things like that. They will more like mimic what's happening in the scene with the flutes and everything, which again is not usually an element of silent cinema. It's usually you're playing the score for the actual scene, not so much like actually making it diegetic music kind of thing. So that makes things a bit confusing as well. But yeah, like I said, you get some great scenes with Gwynplaine, and the fact that he, there's one point where the Duchess is sort of like entranced by him when she goes to see him on stage, and she sort of writes to him and says, I was the only person in the room not laughing. And he is sort of attracted to her at first, to think like, oh, well, is there somebody out there who can see me but also not laugh at me? But then once she finds out the news about him being the heir, she sort of changes her tune a bit, and she sort of starts laughing maybe at the concept. So then he's distraught by that, and he goes back to Dee. So yeah, I think, like I said, it's really impressive for what it does for the time. It's not, like I said, it's an hour and 50 minutes. It does, I don't want to say like drags on. It does do a pretty good job with the time. But again, there are certain elements of like, well, did you need to like draw the story out in this much sense? Could you have simplified it more to be about the man who laughs and about seeing more of this horrific imagery rather than go into like the Queen and the Duchess and that kind of stuff? I'm like, I don't care about the Duchess. Why are we seeing all of this kind of stuff? The last sort of thing that I want to mention is that even though this is already in the movie vault, I do want to give a shout out to the star performer of this film, as well as Mary Philbin, who plays Dee, and Conrad Viet, who plays Gwynplaine, and also Cesar Gravina, who plays Ursus. But also I want to give a shout out to Zimbo, who plays Homo the wolf. So there's a dog in this film. In real life, it's called Zimbo. And for some reason, this dog's called Homo. I'm like, okay. I didn't expect to be watching a film and going, go Homo! And apparently, at the end of the film, I was looking at the credits, and it's Homo the wolf. So I was there throughout there going like, oh, what a good dog. And I was like, oh, he's a wolf, apparently. And yeah, this dog is like, what a good dog he is. Like, I just want to give him like a good doggo award, because like it happens a lot within silent films. I don't know if it's this period of time people were just more attached to dogs or not. But essentially when Ursus and Dee are looking to leave the town and get onto the boat when they think that Gwynplaine has died, Homo, being the good dog he is, sort of sniffs him out. So their wagon is broken down, and they're sort of like having a bit of problems in the middle of the town. And at the same time, Gwynplaine is going past in like a posh chariot to go get married and everything, and Homo sort of smells him on the posh chariot once he leaves, so he like grabs Dee, and this is just such a cute scene in which she's literally, because again, she's blind, she's been like dragged along by this dog who's just like holding her by her dress and just like taking her to this place. So they've just literally got like a tracking shot that goes alongside with just this dog holding onto her dress. And then they get to like the Parliament building, and like all the guards are like trying to like make it so that she doesn't enter, and the dog is like snarling at them and everything. And at one point then this lord sort of grabs her and takes her in to sort of help confuse the situation about when Gwynplaine leaves. And they don't let the dog in. I was like, oh, I hope Homo will be okay. And then at the end, literally, Gwynplaine is there trying to like run to this boat, and like Ursus and Dee are just there, and Dee's also like, I think she's been like drugged at this point. And Ursus is sort of like caring for her, and she's sort of like asking about where Gwynplaine is, and she misses Gwynplaine. And you can see him like shouting, and he's like trying to like chase the boat down. And of course, Homo's the one who's like there, like on the top of the boat, barking like, I see you, I see you. The dog jumps off the boat, is just like swimming all cute in the sea, and then sees that the jester guy in the army is chasing after Gwynplaine. So what does Homo do? He gets out of the water, snarls at the jester, pounces on him, bites his throat. Literally, like, all you see is just this like wolf on this guy just gnawing at his face. He then just like takes him into the ocean, kills him. The guy's hat floats on the water, and then Homo swims away like a good little dog, gets back on the boat with Gwynplaine once he's managed to get there on his pedal boat, and they all live happy together. And I was like, yay, Homo, this dog survived, and he like heroically like killed the villain. and like protected.
Dog. He sounds like a really good.
Yeah, this was like whoever trained this dog back in 1928. They did a good job. Like he like acted the hell out of this film. There's so many times in which like he looked sad when Gwynplaine left, and then when Dee was on her own, he like comes up to her and like puts his head on her and stuff. I was like, oh. So
made even more impressive by the fact apparently it's a wolf.
Yeah. So big shout out to Zimbo in this film. He did good. But yeah.
I wonder if anybody gave Homer a bone.
Yeah, he does look like he has like a chicken leg or something at some point when he's happy that Gwynplaine is like back at when Gwynplaine leaves at one point, he like starts eating a chicken bone underneath the wagon. So yeah, he probably got fed well. But yeah, I think this film definitely deserves its spot in the movie vault for the inspiration of the Joker, the imagery alone. But like I said, it deals with some really like interesting themes for the time. And even technically as well, like I said, you have like nice tracking shots and some impressive imagery. And I think that, it obviously helped to lead to a lot of films we would have later on, like our horror films and more of like our dramas and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it does deserve its place, but it was very different from what I expected expectation-wise.
If the film was to be remade today, do you think it would work in that sense? If it was, if casting and production took place tomorrow, do you think they'd have to change much? Or could they keep it in the same sort of style that it was portrayed back then?
Yeah, well, I was thinking that because I thought that was the only thing that you did miss with it being silent is that you kind of, because it's called The Man Who Laughs, it would be nice to hear people laughing, or at least you don't so much need it when people are looking at him laughing, because obviously you can just tell by the way people are cracking up. But when you hear The Man Who Laughs, you think like, oh, it's inspiration for the Joker. It must be like the Joker, somebody who can't stop laughing or is like psychotically laughing. So the fact that he isn't actually laughing and he's just constantly got like a sinister grin, I think it'd be interesting if you could kind of hear that sometimes, if you could hear his kind of like crying or like horrific sounds he's making behind this like horrific grin. I think that would sort of make things a bit more like traumatizing, a bit more scary. Or if you did have the element of somebody who literally keeps laughing, because nobody's actually really done that with the Joker. Maybe Jack Nicholson, but again, a lot of that was like prosthetics and that kind of stuff. So I'd be interested to see if somebody actually takes this aspect of this character and runs with it for Joker, because I would like to see somebody who does that, because that's what Joker does to people. He, the spray and stuff he has puts that permanent grin on their face. I'd like to see somebody who does the Joker who is just literally permanently grinning like everything he says and does. I think that'd be quite interesting. But you can definitely see a lot of like inspiration that this film brings up, the idea of like society being against you and laughing at inappropriate things. So there's times where people, when Ursa first meets him, for example, he takes the baby and he's like, oh, the baby's blind, and he's like, stop laughing, why are you laughing? And then he realizes that he's scarred. So there's many times in the film onwards from that where people don't realize what's wrong with him, and they're like, why is he laughing, why is he smiling at this, and that kind of stuff as well. So I think if they did remake it and they wanted to go with the imagery, the silence of it can help, but you need more of that imagery and more scary, like horrific moments of that. But if you had to go with sort of like the audio aspect and remake it, but you would lose a lot with like losing the black and white and the time it was made and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I would only be interested in sort of maybe if they did it in a way of like focusing just on the character and hearing like the laugh and the sounds of that character without like adding any of the other melodramatic stuff. So yeah, all of those deserve their places in the movie vault. So we won't be going to the movie vault this week, obviously, because we are talking about films that are already in there. So back in the vault they go, and safe they shall stay. And yeah, we'll put some awards in there as well. So the Good Doggo Award for Zimbo. Any awards you guys want to give to aspects of your films?
I think best pie maker just has to go to Miss Lovett. More deserving woman to win the coveted award.
Best singing performance from Alan Rickman as in Pretty Women.
Yeah, 100% best singing performance. And yeah, that's me all out of awards. But Anthony does not deserve anything. He's not getting anything.
Craig, anything from Groundhog Day?
Yep, I'm going to give my best version of February 2nd to version 163. That was a good version. Well done to you.
Go find that version. Reason to go watch that film. It's like, this is the version he's on about. Nice little tease there.
We're in the end game now.
It's so annoying!
Okay, endgame time. This is called Welcome to the Movie Vault, the director's cut.
Oh.
Obviously, we haven't had any new films go into the film vault this week. So I thought what would be fun is to see the sort of films that that renowned directors of the craft would want to see in the movie vault themselves. So what I've done is I've taken 10 directors, so I will give you 5 each. And I'm giving you a selection of 3 films. One of them is a film that director has noted is one of their favorites, hence would be something they would put in the movie vault. You get a point if you can guess which is the correct film. So you're playing for a total of 5 points for this round. Everything clear?
It's all clear? Yeah.
Stephen, as the guest, you can go first or second, which will also determine which list you get.
I will go first.
Okay. So Stephen, your first director is Martin Scorsese. Which of these 3 films has Martin Scorsese said is genuinely one of his top 10 favorite movies, or top 10 movies that everyone should go and see? Your choices are Black Klansman, North by Northwest, or Avengers Endgame.
What was the first one again, sorry?
Black Klansman.
I'm going to go for Avengers Endgame.
Okay. So to be clear, you're saying that Martin Scorsese, the guy who has famously said that Marvel is destroying cinema, would happily have everybody watch Avengers Endgame.
Niall, if you're at home, I'm sorry. If you're listening.
That was the dummy one to see as the trick. David, do you happen to know which one it would be?
North by Northwest?
It's Black Klansman.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to say that as my original answer. That's why I asked you. Oh, man.
Well, of course you were going to say that once I ruled out the other one.
Yeah, you just need it. You got it easy.
David, your first director is Steven Spielberg.
Yay.
Which of these 3 films has he said is one of his top 6 favorite movies? Is it The Grand Budapest Hotel, Tootsie, or The Godfather Part 2?
That's difficult. Depends. Yeah, depends if he's talking about. Well, it's his personal favorite, isn't it? So again, it's not so whether he's talking about it in a certain context. I'm gonna go with The Godfather Part 2.
It was Tootsie.
Oh, okay. I was leaning towards Grand Budapest Hotel, so at least I know it was neither of my main guesses.
He did, however, have the original Godfather in his list.
Yeah, that was the thing that threw me. I was like, would it be Part 2? But
what is Tootsie, out of curiosity? What is that all about?
It's an incredibly popular film that I've never heard of. A couple of the directors on this list have had this film in like their top 10s.
Need to put this on the list.
So, Stephen, your next director is Antoine Fuqua. And these are the 3 films: The Exorcist, Fences, Alaska.
Well, Craig, I'm not going to think about it too much. I'm going to hit you with Alaska.
Yeah, maybe you should have been a bit more on the fence about that one. It was Fences, which is a big surprise to me because I was not a big fan of that film.
Yeah. What was the other? What was it? Fences, Alaska, and
The Exorcist.
Okay.
So, David, your next director is Wes Anderson.
Oh.
And these are your choices. Was it From the Life of Marionettes, Ghost in the Shell, or Gone Girl?
Oh, he's such a weird director again, so I don't know if he's going to like go for something that is not like his kind of film he makes, which he personally appreciates. What was the first one?
From the Life of Marionettes.
I'm going to go for Ghost in the Shell.
Oh.
So the unfortunate thing there is I chose that because his favorite anime series is Neon Genesis Evangelion.
See, I was like, he seems like an anime sort of lover, so...
It's From the Life of Marionettes.
Right.
So you should have gone with the instinct of this seems like the sort of film he would have made.
Exactly.
Stephen, your next director is Paul Feige. These are the three films you have. Quantum of Solace, Superbad, This Is the End.
That's a mixture, isn't it? Oh, wow. If one of these, like, I can understand Quantum of Solace being in there, but if the other two are in there, then you need some questioning. But I feel like it's not going to be Quantum of Solace, I don't feel like that. So I think it's between the two. So I'm going to go for This Is the End.
Oh, damn it. Yeah, if you had put Quantum of Solace, I would have just, I was like, look, some of your films are not great, but what the hell are you doing, man?
I understand This Is the End, but there is an article where he basically eloquently explains why he thinks it's an incredibly fun comedy, just poking fun at a load of actors' tropes.
Yeah, I think that's a very kind of like Hollywood person film to enjoy because they're like, oh, it's making fun of us, you know.
Yeah.
Uncle Zero in the film really makes me laugh.
So, David, your next director is Jon Favreau.
Ooh.
What did he want? Did he want The Magnificent Seven, Blinded by the Light, or Kung Fu Panda?
I don't know what's been thrown in here as kind of like things to throw me from his past experience. I'm gonna go with I'll just have to go with Magnificent Seven. This is either a trap or it's genuinely there because of inspiration.
Oh.
It's Kung Fu Panda.
Oh.
On his original list, he had Seven Samurai.
Right, that's the other one that was in my head.
That was the trap.
Yeah, of course.
So at the end of three directors, Stephen is the lead with 1-0.
Is Kung Fu, was it just like, it's a nice family film, or was it like,
the article I saw, there wasn't
like an explanation? Okay.
It just had them there. And I was like, okay, fair enough. So Stephen, your next director is Brett Ratner. Is one of his favorite films The Hangover, Ali G in the House, or Kill Bill Volume 2?
I've actually watched all three of these films, which is a rarity. Now, obviously, Kill Bill, classic, but the way it's been going, you've been throwing people off, but I feel as though that has to stop now. So I'm going to say Kill Bill Volume 2.
So the embarrassing thing is these are all permutations of films he actually wanted. I put Kill Bill Volume 2 because he wants Kill Bill in his top 10. I put Ali G in the House because his sixth favourite film is Borat. And it was The Hangover he had on the list at number 7. Or at number 2, actually, I think.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. David, your next director is James Gray. Does he like Singing in the Rain, Goodfellas, or Romeo and Juliet?
Don't think I know who James Gray is. This would just be a stab in the dark, so I can't say, I know who this guy is. I'm going to say Romeo and Juliet.
Singing in the Rain.
Damn it. I was like, I've gone for the inspirational one too much. I'll go for like the obscure one.
Just to put the pressure on, Stephen, if you get this next one right, you have instantly won. Your last director is Lena Dunham. Did she want Zero Dark 30, Fish Tank, or Reservoir Dogs?
My friend Craig, I believe she wanted Fish Tank.
Oh my god. What?
Yep. So David, just to see if you can end this game with a point.
Oh, this is a reoccurring theme, isn't it?
Yep. So, David, your final director is Sofia Coppola.
Okay.
Did she want Calamity Jane, Let the Right One In, or The Waterboy?
I'm going to say Let the Right One In. Yeah, thank God. If she had put Waterboy in, I would have questioned everything.
Can I give a small victory speech?
So, at the end of the director's cut, the scores are as follows. David ends with 1, but our winner with 2 is Stephen.
Well
Yes.
done, Steve.
Thank you, Dave. I'd just like to thank my mum for raising a winner, and I'd like to thank Dave for being a loser.
Last time I was just like, sports movies can't, like, like this is like directors, like, oh, God's sake. So, yeah. Well done, Steve. Thank you, Craig, for another entertaining endgame. We've had fun today exploring movies from the vault. If you have listened to our episodes before where we talk about what films we want to put into the movie vault, let us know what films you have never seen before or you think deserve to be in there or don't deserve to be in there, ones you would want to add. And yeah, let us know. Possibly we'll put like a list out quite soon which can go through everything that's currently in there. And yeah, also let us know the films that you've seen before that you've had expectations, didn't meet your expectations, were better, were worse than you thought, and what are some of your favorite Easter eggs. Let us know. We're gonna get out of here now, but Steve, where can the people catch you?
So the people can catch me over at Empora, a sports and adventure website that is dedicated to bringing you every type of adventure. So currently we've got our new England issue coming out, which should be out mid-April, and it's going to have articles about everything great about England. And yeah, you can also catch me over on Fresh Take, where me and yourself have got a great new series coming called Never Have I Seen, or Never Seen even. And it's going to be about the films that I haven't seen before. So, it's going to be a great bit of fun. I'm going to be getting to watch some classics, and you can find that over on the Fresh Take Hub.
Yeah, sounds very fun, man. Check it out. You can catch us at freshtakehub.com. As Steve said, lots to check out on there at the moment. You can check out mine, Kelly's, Jake's, and Niall's thoughts on the Justice League cut that has just come out, the Snyder cut, talking about director's cuts as we did in that Endgame. We sort of give our opinions as we reacted to the different elements, such as the characters, the story, etc. So go check that one out. And yeah, you can check out our video content, which will soon be added Never Seen onto that content. But we've also got my video essay, which is all about Spider-Man, the first Avenger, talking about how he is very much the Superman of Marvel. So yeah, get us onto all your social medias at Well Good Movies on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And you can also catch Fresh Take Hub on the same socials at Fresh Take Hub. Craig, anything lastly for yourself?
Run now, film god. You are temporarily free. Run, get out while you still have a chance.
We'll have to visit him soon. It's been a pandemic. I hope he's okay. So yeah, thank you for joining us once again, guys. And yeah, tell us at home what films you're going to be checking out from the vault, what ones you would add in there, and we hope to be adding some more very soon. Catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye. So, Stephen, your next director is Paul Feig. Or Feig. Oh, it's Feig. Okay, fine. Stephen, your next director is Paul...
Dak! Flaky!
I thought I said flaky.